when your confidence exceeds your capabilities by too much, you're probably going to, take too many risks. How do you see locus of control influencing company-wide decisions from the top?
Digging deeper into the questions we get about building projects, developing talent, and growing a construction business.
So we'll get a little background, little context on where that question came from. That came in around one of our insights talking about of control. Locus of control is the degree to which someone believes they have influence over outcomes. It's a part of personality psychology, and that's a part of organizational development. And probably the best way to think about personality psychology, organizational development, as they are to people what material science and engineering is to the materials that we use to go construct projects. When it comes to scaling a contractor, the people side is just as important as the material science and engineering side, and yet we spend far less time focusing on the people side of the business than we do on the material science and engineering. Now, drive across bridges all the time, so I'm super happy we spend a lot of time on the material science and engineering side. But if you really want to scale a construction business, you've got to start investing at some point in your career. You've got to start investing an equal amount of time in understanding the personality, psychology, and the organizational development principles around people. So with the locus of control, they basically, define on one end of the spectrum. And again, everybody falls on different parts of the spectrum in different areas. But on one side of the spectrum is more of an external locus of control. Waiting, blaming, resentment, those are the types of things that come up when there's an external locus of control. You'll hear words like we should and they should, we being in quotes, because we, when somebody uses it in that context, usually means someone, but really not me. So when they say we, it's kind of a fake we type of scenario. And then with an internal locus of control, that's where there's this bias towards action. I will and I did. Those are the phrases that you're going to hear from someone that has more of an internal locus of control. You can start to check for that in job interviews. It's a really helpful thing to start checking for. So I want to cover a couple quick, and there's more information on our website about locus of control. You can go look it up. But I want to talk about a couple other very closely related principles. One, Stephen Covey from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Love this book. Totally changed a lot of probably the trajectory of my career. And he describes it as you have a circle of concern, things that you're aware of, things that you're paying attention to, and a smaller circle of influence. And if you're proactive with your energy, you're always working to go expand both. You're working to go expand the additional things that you see in on the project, within the company, within the community you live in, and within the world that we live in. And you're also continually working to expand your circle of influence. On the other hand, if there's more of a reactive focus, you are working to shrink both of those. You're working to tighten up your circle of concern to where it's really as narrow as possible around your circle of influence, because you want to probably think about it as a circle of control. But remember, we're hurtling through space at 67,000 miles per hour. So realistically, control is just control is probably not the right word to ever use. So another related concept, that's really important that ties into this and ties into the answer is kind of what I would call your confidence and your capability ratio. And so those things need to be in line. When they're in alignment, you're relatively safe. When your confidence exceeds your capabilities by too much, you're probably going to take too many risks. You're going to place too large of a bet, and you could lose. So don't be confident you can jump out of an airplane if you don't have the capability to jump out of an airplane. On the other hand, if your confidence is low as compared to your capabilities, you're probably being too conservative. You're not taking enough risks to get a good return. So you kind of want to keep that balance right in the middle. Another important piece of this is understanding that there's few absolutes. So the last time that I had any absolutes, I was in the field. I'm working. There are some definite absolutes in the field, some do's and do nots. And I came up as an electrician, so the lights coming on, there are absolutes to that. Once you get into foremanship, superintendent, project management, and any roles above that, there are fewer and fewer absolutes. And so it's understanding that there's never really 100% confidence or 100% capability. And that varies significantly, depending on what you're making a decision about. And you have to be comfortable making decisions with that ambiguity. And the last piece to tie into that is Dunning-Kruger. There are a couple of researchers, and so they had studied how this truly plays out in the population. And here's what the curve actually looks like. So we talked about what it should look like. Here's what it actually looks like: is when people first start to learn something, going from like really zero capability to a little bit of capability, their confidence shoots way, way, way up. Okay. And that's not out of arrogance. That's because of not knowing. So once those people see, what's going on, their confidence immediately starts to drop and come back into a realistic range. But you can see in that very, very beginning, that's where there's a lot of risk that's involved. So think about a new person coming onto your project. That's where your safety risk zone, happens to be. That a person's not trying to get hurt. They're just overly confident in their own abilities. They're overly confident in the protections that may be around them, which are never 100%. And so then they're going to overextend themselves. Now, then your other, thing that happens is then once people start to learn that, they kind of, touch the hot burner. If you're a parent, your kids are going to touch the hot burner. So then they start to become a little bit less confident over time, and it dips way, way down into that too conservative range for quite a while. That's also a problem to work through, especially with your middle managers, new managers into a role. That's a really important portion to work through. So you got to work to go build them up. On the other side of that curve, you get to become an expert, but you are unaware of how far or where everybody else is on that curve. And if you design the organization, you design your team, you design the organization, you design your systems around everybody being at the right-hand side of that curve, total failed mission. That also won't work out. So back to the question, how do you see locus of control influencing company-wide decisions from the top for construction contractors? I'm going to break it up into three really big examples. And these are, when I think about decisions from the top, what that means is this is where the leader is committing the company to a specific direction, and they're committing major resources. And along with those, when you talk about that range, that these are not things that have guaranteed 80-90% probabilities of outcomes. These are things that might have 75% chances of outcomes or even less, but you're making major commitments just the same. And these come around strategic market choices. Where are we going to choose to play, and how are we going to choose to win in that marketplace? For somebody that has more of an external locus of control, which we see a lot, they're a lot more reactive. They think about it more like birds of prey. Whatever happens to be out there, this is what I got to go take. The second place we see it is with opportunity evaluation for major projects. You have projects that might be anywhere from 30 to 50% or more to total annual volume. Projects that are, maybe part of your strategic choices, but they're not things that you have comfortable capabilities in. You can be very overconfident about your capabilities, and that overconfidence in the capabilities will change your pricing, change your terms. It'll change how much planning and effort you put into those projects and the risk controls. Travelers Construction Surety had a recent announcement that 60% of the contractor failures that they found were around a single catastrophic project failure. So one single catastrophic project taking out a contractor. That's the risk that you take as the owner, as a top executive in a business, as you go out there and you're looking at a major project. And then the third is on negotiation on pricing and terms. And that comes back to being more of an external locus of control. You will hear language, and you'll hear this all throughout an organization. It's a great thing to look for in an interview if you're hiring people. When people are talking about this is whatever the customer wants, this is what they told me, this is how it is. And that can go from, how much we're going to charge for the project to what our change order process is, the terms around claims and when we agree to disagree, terms around payments, all of those things. Whereas somebody with more internal locus of control negotiates far, far differently on those. And you'd be surprised how we'll see two different contractors in exactly identical markets, even sometimes working for the same exact customer, getting dramatically different terms and has dramatically different outcomes on their businesses. The second question that came in was, How do you help individuals? So this is, if I'm a manager, how can I help individuals and teams shift their locus of control towards more internal? So this one sounds kind of funny. This sounds probably, it starts with being a parent and recognizing that by the time you get somebody into your organization, that phase is already passed. But it really starts with unconditional love. So that's the first part, is that person needs to know that they have a pretty solid safety net that they can fall down on. The second component of that, after they know they have a pretty solid safety net, and I'm not talking about coddling, I'm talking about a solid safety net. And those are two very different things. Is progressive overload. And that's, consistent, very intentional, and over time progressively overloading somebody. And that's how you develop a skill in any area. That's how you develop capabilities, whether it's something physical, whether it's running, weightlifting, bicycling, whatever it happens to be, or something mentally, is consistently giving somebody something that's just a little bit more challenging, a little bit longer, whatever it is. And I would always go back to the 10% rule with running or almost any other physical activity, is that you never want to make more than a 10% increase in your distance, your pace, your weight, whatever it is, and any, more than once a week type of thing. And even 10%, depending on, as you get nearer the top of your game, everybody has a performance curve. As you get nearer the top of your game, it might be more like 1%. It's not going to be in these 10% increments. So how do you go build that? This is about being really, really intentional. One is just standard work procedures. And as funny as it sounds, just the act of following a standard work procedure starts to build confidence. When somebody's doing something over and over and it's the right thing to do and they're getting the right outcomes really consistently, that starts to build confidence. And that's the baseline of it. And then starting to check on other people, looking at, look at yourself, look at other people. A couple of weeks ago, I heard somebody who's in charge of project management, and he's like, wow, I failed my own audit on performance. He's actually checking others and checking himself to see how he's doing. And then starting to improve those, make improvements to those standard work procedures. These are small things. And then starting to, once you've gotten really good at making some small improvements, now maybe you start to develop a procedure all on your own. Paul Akers talked about that a lot in 2-second lean improvements. And those are super valuable, especially learning from failures, learning that I can fail, but I'm not a failure. It sounds really simple. It's really, really challenging. And if somebody, depending on the environment that they were raised in, depending on managers that they may have had in the past, that's, either way, you get what you get out of a person. You've got to start building from there. And then, we kind of, once somebody's got those basics down, these small improvements, these 2-second lean improvements, back up and start looking at the whole workflow. So we'll use like a high involvement workflow mapping process, and we'll get teams together to see, do they start to see the connections between all these things? And do they see improvements they can make, not to the individual procedures, but to the workflow itself? And then, sometimes like we call it fill or kill. It's a fairly common thing where for these small improvements, you're forcing teams to identify the small improvements. Everybody can identify something that bugs them, right? This gets back, Paul Akers talks about in 2-second lean. And, they can identify the small things. Look, if you haven't moved this thing forward and filled it and fixed it in a 30-day period of time, just kill it, pull it off the list. So you avoid people getting into this habit of these forever to-do lists. If you really want a forever to-do list for your company, and invite any given consulting firm in, and I promise you, we can make a list of a million things that you can go do. Totally not helpful. And then as people get progressively better at that, have them participate in meetings, just starting with sitting and observing where these progressively larger decisions and larger resource commitments are being made. And then they will start to learn from it, the discussions and the dialogue. They're not really participating in it. They'll feel really weird about it while they're there, right? Because they're not going to feel like they're doing anything. They're not going to feel like they're being paid attention to. Let them sit in the discomfort for 6 months, 8 months, for 10, 12 of these meetings. And they'll start to get in a rhythm and start to see where they can add value and everything. And you just progressively build people from there. So that's how you do it. Probably a little bit of a longer answer, but this is really the heart of talent development. How does locus of control factor into innovation and adoption of new technologies? All right. So I'm going to start by saying technology is absolutely amazing. And the challenge is that technology can give a feeling of control and progress and problems that are far, far in excess of actual. So it has the ability to massively skew some of these curves. And so, to give the range on it, and this is not going to be a simple answer. There's some other questions that relate to some other posts that are specifically about technology that will probably go a little bit deeper. But for instance, we have contractors that have their virtual construction integrated into everything from their market strategy. They don't pursue projects where that doesn't give them a absolute competitive advantage, to their supply chain. So that if they even start to design something that isn't readily available or there's longer than expected lead times, it'll automatically flag if there's a pricing or a supply chain issue. And then tied all the way out to directly to automated machines that are in the fabrication facility, so that they've continued to be able to fabricate and deliver more products to the field, keeping basically the same amount of headcount inside their fabrication shop, because they've continued to focus on technology. And then they take that technology all the way through to job site logistics. So that's kind of at one end of the bell curve. For the most part, we see that, looking at the industry, when you really back up and look at it, overall technology has done very little to move the needle on construction productivity or safety. And it's not because the technology in itself is the problem. It's because it's not aligned with the workflows and the comfortable capabilities of the company or the person. And that's really where you start to see technology failures. It's really the confidence versus capabilities problem.
Go to dbmteam.com for more insights and resources, or to ask a question.